We're here on the top of Daf Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis, and we're up to Masiv Ula, which is approximately 6 lines down from the top. Now, we were discussing yesterday, at the beginning of this sugya, the opinion of Rav Sheshes. And Rav Sheshes wanted to prove, if you recall from a brisa, that in event that she had 2 witnesses to rely upon who testified that her husband died, and she married a second husband relying on these 2 witnesses, then even the Rabbanan would agree that she could go back to her first husband, meaning she doesn't deserve any penalty because she had every right to rely on the testimony of 2 witnesses. Masiv Ula. Mi Amrinan, do we actually accept this logic of Rav Sheshes? My Havi Le'lemevat. What should she have done? Did she do anything wrong? She's totally anus. Anusa means circumstances beyond your control. And that's the basis underlying Rav Sheshes' principle that in the case where there were 2 Eidim, she can go back to her original husband. But not, what are you going to do with the following Mishnah? Now, you may know that the first Mishnah in Gittin establishes that if a get is brought from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael with a shliach, then that shliach has to testify, b'fanai nechtam, which means I know that this get was written by the sofer lishma, specifically with the intention for this husband and this wife. That's number 1. Number 2, the sofer who writes the get, till now we're talking about the shliach who brings the get, the sofer who writes the get has to include the date on which he wrote the get. That has to be written in the get. And the date has to reflect the years of the Malchus, meaning in every country, they count the years based on the kingship. So it's like the 7th year to the kingship of Alexander, whoever it was. What's the deal in event that the sofer omitted counting the years of Malchus, of the kingship? Alternatively, the Mishnah wants to know, what about a case of what we call an illegitimate malchus, which means that some sort of tyrannical military upstart, the Taliban, they took over the country. And the sofer started writing the years for this, since the kingship of this illegitimate malchus. Classically, this is a reference to Rome. And let's say Rome subjugated various people. The Romans at that time were very colonial. They wanted to take over the world. So let's say they took over, for example, Bava. And the Babylonian area became subject to the Roman emperor, the Roman ruler. Another alternative. Asav l'shem malchus bada, l'shem malchus yavam. He wrote in the get a date that reflects the malchus of Madai or Yavam. And apparently the rabbinic halacha was not very tolerant of such a writing. Because again, these were nations that created Golus, that subjugated the Jewish people. Another case, Lebinyan Abayis. He mentioned what year is it since the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, which sounds like a good thing, but it doesn't fit into the normal pattern of Zman and Get. Zman and Get requires the Malchus, not the Binyan Abayis. L'churban Abayis. He wrote, how many years has it been since the destruction? Now, this Mishnah is enumerating a whole bunch of cases where the get is possible. She still remains an Ashes Ish. And if she would go ahead based on this disqualified get, go ahead and get married to another person, she would suffer the consequences. Now, until this point, in this long list of Psulei Gittin, we had Psulei Zman. Now we go on to a different Psul, which is called Psul Makom. Every testimony must be clear, absolutely crystal clear with regard to two elements. Makom, where did this take place? And we're documenting this and signing this document. And number two, Zman. What did I just say? Zman and Makom. Got to write exactly the location where this took place. This is all based on the parasha called Hazam. Are you familiar with Hazam? It's very simple. If two witnesses testify, another pair of witnesses come in and say, well, you couldn't have possibly been there to have seen that. You were with us on that time in a different place, at that time in a different place. So the essence of Eidos is that it lends itself to this kind of contradiction to Hazama, and therefore the Eidim have to be crystal clear about Zman and Makom. And that's true for a get. A get is a shtar. It's Eidos B'Ksav. It's written testimony with the signatures of two witnesses. They have to testify about the Zman, and the Zman doesn't mean since the Churban. It means the official Zman as it's recorded in the legal documents of that time, and Makom. So therefore, Hoya B'Tzad Mizrach, V'Kasa B'Tzad Marav. Imagine you have the north and the south. You know, you got the Confederates and against the north, right? And he writes on the get that this get is being delivered in the north, when in truth it was delivered in the south, or vice versa. The Meir V'Kasa B'Mizrach. He writes it was in the east, when in truth it was in the west. Is all these gittin, which have improper and imprecise makom or zman, they're all psulim, disqualified, because makom and zman is the key, the critical elements in edus, in a get or a shtar, and therefore, if she went ahead and got married to a second man, based on this hustle a get, then teitze mizeh mizeh. She can no longer remain with the second husband, and she can't even go back to her first husband. And now the Mishnah adds, "V'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba." All the knossos and the penalties that were enumerated back in the beginning of our parak, in the Mishnah Daf Pei Zayin, they all apply in this case, meaning in any one of these fluky and disqualified shtarts or git. So there's now an equation between a woman who supposedly her husband died, and we have one witness to testify to that effect, and then it turns out that her husband is indeed alive, and we have a whole list of knossos, of penalties that will apply to her. She can't go back to this husband, can't live with this husband, she needs to get from both of them, and she was a ksuba, etc., etc. All those laws and knossos will apply to a woman who received a disqualified get, a get puzzle, and went ahead and got married based on that get. So the Gemara asks, Akash on Rav Sheshes, Bamai, why should we penalize him? Lema, we should say, according to the logic of Ula, of Rav Sheshes, sorry. My Havi Leila Meva. She had every reason to believe that this get is a get kosher. So you see clearly, says Ula, that this halach of knas is not dependent upon whether Havi Leila Meva, lo Havi Leila Meva. It's an absolute rule that if a married woman lives with another man, you could try to justify it. She relied on a get, she relied on a witness, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Takes him muzeh and kol hadrachim ha'elu bo. And I think that the implication here of this Gemara is that she can't be naive about the get and assume that it's kosher. And she'll say, well, I don't know how to read the get. Bring it to an expert. Make sure that the get was written properly. Was the get delivered in the west or in the east? In the north or the south? And the expert will be able to determine not only his makom, but also zman. What are you mentioning the Romans? We don't count years according to the Romans. So the truth is that Rav Sheshes will have to find some fault with this woman who received a get puzzle. Otherwise, according to Rav Shesh's Veltanchan, it's impossible to impose knossos because my Havi Leila Mevet. So there must be some element of negligence. And the Gemara answers, Iboile la la kriye gita. She should have read a get, presumably in front of a Talmud Chacham, and he knows the laws of Gerushin, and let him tell you that the get is kosher. So that as far as this sugya, this part of the sugya which we're making a close, a finito on, Rav Sheshes will have to interpret the mission of get puzzle of Teitze Mizeh under the rubric of Knas and introduce the principle of Iboila La Kriye. She's responsible to know what's written in the get and to be absolutely convinced that the get is kosher before she makes a move to get remarried. And apparently she was negligent. She did not live up to this responsibility. She didn't bother reading the get or showing it to an expert. And she naively said, all right, I got a get. I'm going to go get married. So, for example, today, in the Batei Dinim all over the world, a woman is not given the get to read because the get was supervised by the Rabbanan, a bezdin of Shlosha, and they determined that the get is kosher. She doesn't have the right to second guess them. And in order to avoid such a situation, the minig is that we cut through the get and we put it away, we stash it away. She doesn't get the get. She doesn't even have possession over the get. So quite obviously, she has no guilt here of boy. What's the most like boy la gita? We're not even going to get. She'll get the get for a split second, and that's it. We take it back. What the Bezdin will do is they'll write a new star, which is called a pturin, miloshin ptur, meaning that she's potter and she can marry anyone else. And then they'll write except for a Kohen. And that pturin is the document that she gets into her possession. She better make a couple of copies of it in case it gets lost, because if she wants to come to a Masechet Kedushin and have him marry her off to another man, he's going to ask for the pturin. Prove to me that you got divorced from your first husband, previous husband. So let me just get a little bit of drink here. Sorry. Omar Rav Shimi bar Ashi. Oshma. Once again, we're going to disprove Rav Sheshes, and we're going to prove that there's no exemption from the knasos based on the fact that my havi leilamev and I couldn't have done it otherwise. Akone says yivimto. So the two brothers, one of them got married, but unfortunately died without children. His wife falls for yibum to his other brother. And he also had another wife, the late brother. Now, the Yavam, that's his live surviving brother, marries one of these two women. Olcha Tzarasa B'Nisens. The Tzara went ahead and got married to a man, which l'chora she's allowed to do, because the Yavam chose to be miyabim the other tzara. She's off the hook. Nimtzei Zu Islands. Now we find out that the woman that Shimon is the surviving brother, when he was miyabim Rachel, I shouldn't use Rachel and Leah because that would imply they're sisters, but Rachel and Leah are not sisters in this case. So when Shimon was miyabim Rachel, that patters up Leah, the tzara, and allows her to marry anyone else. But unfortunately, as it would turn out, Rachel was an islandess. We'll see what islandess means, but the bottom line is an islandess does not fall for yibum. So the entire process of yibum that took place between Shimon and Rachel is totally meaningless, which means that Leah, the late Reuven's other wife, is in the zikas yibum mode. Because the only thing that could pater her from yibum is the yibum to hatzara, but the yibum to hatzara is not worth a dime, because as it turns out, this tzara was an islandess. And an islandess is a woman who cannot conceive and certainly can't give birth. And in such a case, she's not included in the parsha of Yibum. Nimtzei Zu islandess. Rabbosa. What guilt is Rav Sheshes going to place on the shoulders of this woman, this tzara, right? Leah, who's a tzara to Rachel, for going out and getting married? That now the Mishnah establishes a knas of teitzei mizeh u'mizeh v'kol hadrachim ha'eluma. It's exactly like the case of a woman who relied on the testimony of one man, one witness, that her husband had died. Lo and behold, the husband is alive, and kol hadrachim eluba. She loses her ksuba, she loses any rights to the ksuba. But here, Rav Sheshes, did she, Leah, anticipate that Rachel was going to be an islandess? In fact, an islandess is 20 years old. The Yibum may have taken place when Rachel was 12 years old. We're going to have to wait full 8 years until we establish her as an islandess, which means that at the age of 20, she still hasn't developed the signs of puberty. How could Leah be at fault for going ahead and getting married and not anticipating that Rachel might turn out 8 years down the line to be an islandess? And once again, this disproves the thesis of Rav Sheshes. And the Gemara says, Amai, why should there be a knas? Nema, my havi leilumev. And the Gemara rejects it and says something amazing. I don't know. Afraid to read this. So both, I'm going to take a shot at it. I can't find right now anyone who sheds a light on this, so I'm just going to go with my intuition. It's true that Rachel is only 12 years old, but Rachel, at the age of 12, should have simone gadlus. A 12-year-old girl in a normal biological world does have simonim. It could be that a year will go by, she's 13, 14, and she doesn't show simonim. But something is not going right here. There's something that's not totally biologically normal. And therefore, once we have a kind of a leidas hasofek, there's room to suspect that if Rachel has not yet produced simonim, puberty signs, then maybe she's an islandess. We're going to tell Leah that before you get married to another man, check out the simonim situation and find out whether Rachel developed simonim or not. I'll tell you why this pshat can't be right, even though I thought it was a pretty good pshat. Because if that be the case, how is Shimon allowed to be miyabed Rachel if she has no simon? Because if she turns out to be an islandess, then she's Eishes Achid. And he's having a relationship with an Arab. You have an English translation there?
No.
No. I was wondering if there's a footnote. Here in the Masifta, I'm not finding a note on this, which is a little bit disappointing, but it may be my fault. Let me just see by chance. I don't hold up too much hope for this. Is anything here that might help us in the Yalkut HaBi'urim, Sadi Aleph of the Beis? Not finding anything here. Okay, Rebel. So again, I'm going to try to do a little bit more research on this Mirz Hashem, because this is appellate to me that she's held responsible to suspect that maybe Rachel, or Tzara, is an eyeless, or will turn out to be an eyeless. That she has to wait. I don't get it. I mean, and then on the other hand, you're allowing Ruvain, you're allowing Shimon to be Miyavim Rachel. That's exactly what the case is. Why doesn't he have to worry about the fact that she might turn out to be an eyeless? Amar Abai Toshma. Another proof to reject Rav Sheshes. Kol harayos she'amru pochos sorseyan. The Mishnah says that there's a list of harayos that if an erva falls for yibum, like for example, let's say Reuven married Rachel and Shimon married Leah, and Rachel and Leah in this case are sisters. So if Reuven dies, then we have a situation of an erva. What if Reuven has another wife who's not a sister, not an erva? Is pochos tzarasei. Holchu tzaros v'nisu. And once again, we have a situation where the erva knocks off the tzara. So therefore the tzara doesn't have a zikas ibum. She could go ahead and get married. And that's exactly what she did. The only problem is that as it turns out, that erva was an islandess. Nimtzu elu, the word elu in the plural is a reference to the enumerated list of arayos, islandess. Therefore, the tzara could not be married to anyone else. She's not allowed to get married to anyone else. But again, she already got married to anyone else, and now it turns out that the erva was an islandess. And if the erva is an islandess, the erva doesn't fall for yibum. And therefore the tzara falls for yibum. And now she went ahead and got married to someone else. And once again, teitze mizeh umizeh v'chol hadrachim ha'ilubah. But my name of my Havilela again. How could the tzara be expected to anticipate that this erva was an islandess and doesn't pater her up? Lamtune, once again, same shakalatariat. She should have waited to see and be sure that this woman, the erva woman, is not an islandess. I suspect, also, there's something else going on in this. My intuition tells me we're not talking about guilt, criminal guilt, and fault, and knas as a penalty in the classic sense. I think the Gemara is pointing out that she could have known. She could have avoided this situation. And that means she's not an onus. So when the Gemara says iboile lemevad, iboile tuzin lamtune, It doesn't mean necessarily that al pi halacha she has to wait, and that she violated the halacha by not waiting. The Gemara is just pointing out that it could have been that she would wait, and she could have avoided this situation of H's each. Not that we're faulting her and giving her 39 lashes because she was negligent and she got remarried. But as far as the way Chazal set it up, that an Eishes Ish who lives with the second man is Teitze Mizeh Mizeh, that halach will apply, says Rav Sheshes, whenever there was a possibility of avoiding a marriage, which is an adulterous marriage, while the first marriage is still viable. And once that possibility exists, then we're going to apply this, shall I say, uniform, absolute knas halacha of Teitze Mizeh Mizeh V'Kol HaDrachim Elubah. Why? Because they could have been avoided.
It would seem like then whoever he decides to be his Yavama, he should give chalitza to everyone else. Don't do that.
So that's what I'm saying, Steve. This is not addressing a Shulchan Aruch of what should be done. No, well, we don't have to assume that a woman is going to be an eyeless, even if that would mean that there's an error. But I don't have to go around with this psychosis and maybe she'll be an eyeless. Especially when it means that you're delaying a woman from getting married for 8 years. Again, if my assumptions are correct, I could be making a mistake here. But an eyeless is only determined at the age of 20. She can always be a late bloomer, but not past 20. In fact, I think the Gemara says if she has saras after age 20, we assume it's shuma. It's not even halachic saras. She doesn't have simanim. She is an absolute determined eyeless. Well, we have to run around and live our lives based on the possibility. No, I don't think so. He's allowed to be miyavim. As you point out, I also indicated this before. I mean, why was Shimon allowed to be miyavim Eishes Reuven? We called her Rachel. Maybe Rachel turned out to be an eyeless. And now you talk about Eishes Ach. Shalom Makom Mitzvah. Every bia is a bia's error. All his children are mamzerim. So I'm not saying that the Shulchan Aruch would say, well, forget about Yibum, because we always have to worry about the possibility of Nimseis Islands. But the way Chazal set it up, that a woman who's married is now married to another man, and therefore Teitze Mizeh Mizeh, etc., that was a structure unto itself, which applies whenever there was a theoretical possibility of avoiding that situation. So we're not applying the principle of knas in the classic intuitive way. Classic intuitive knas means you were guilty, you were negligent. No. There's no negligence here, but there was a theoretical possibility. It could have been avoided. And therefore you're sucked into this framework in the legal world of halacha that says, Teitze Mizeh Mizeh. I'm just shooting from the hip, as they say. Omar Rava, let's see if we can just fit this in. Toshma, once again, I want to reject Rav Sheshes. Chosav sofer get le'ish, v'shover le'isha. So it means that the get was delivered. He paid up the ksuba, which he has to do after the get, and he receives a shovar from his wife to the effect that she testifies with 2 witnesses signed on this receipt that she had received the ksuba. Get leish v'shover leish. Get leisha v'shover leish. Vehem nasnu zelazeh v'zelazeh. By mistake, the sofer, he had two shtaros. He gave the wrong shtar to the wrong person. So he gave the shovar to the Isha, and he gave the get to the Isha, correct? And the shovar to the Ish. So the Ish, thinking that he was holding on to the get, which was given him by the sofer, he delivered this so-called get to his wife. And it turns out that if you read the get, it's not a get, it's a shovar. Uliachar zman, hare get yotzes mitachas yad ish. V'shover mitachas yad ha'isha. I mean, the shover was meant to be given by her to him, and now it turns out that she opens up the shtar thinking it's a get, and lo and behold, it's a shover. In the meantime, she got married to someone else based on this piece of paper, this document, without even reading the document. Why? Because the sofer gave that document to the ish. She didn't dream it was a shovar. She and the husband thought it was a get, and he delivered that document. Is Teitzei Mizeu Mizevachal Jochem Elva, my name of my Havilel Mevad, and we could write the script of the Gemara's answer without even reading the Gemara. And here I could go with the intuitive understanding of a knas. She's being penalized because she didn't open up the darn piece of paper. Read the paper that you were given and make sure it's a get. No, she relied on the sofer. And no doubt the sofer would have delivered the get to her husband, who in turn delivered it to her. So she naively goes ahead and gets married. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop. Omar of Ashi. Here on Daf Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis, we just make a note of it. We're up to Omar of Ashi. Okay, then. So thank you very much for a great week, and in Mitzvah Hashem, we still have one more week before Slichus. I'm going to give a shir here on Shabbos about Slichus. All right, call to.